All right, today we are going to talk about the HUGO Awards, how I ranked those books. But first, I want to talk about 3 books that I thought were just as deserving of being on the shortlist that were not on the shortlist just because I want to. In particular, there's one that I'm just like, why was it not on the shortlist? But why? One is The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke. I really liked this book. I liked it more than She Who Became the Sun and A Master of Jinn, and I felt like that's a similar type of fantasy. I really loved The Echo Wife by Sarah Gailey. I think if we have entertaining thriller-ish sci-fi on here like we do Project Hail Mary, The Echo Wife is, I think, more thematically rich, and I really love its blend of psychological thriller and sci-fi and like the exploration of generational trauma. Like there was so much in that book that I really liked, and like it's one of the few books where I finished it and I was like, what? Like, what? So I just felt like this was a book that was deserving of being on the short list. But the one where I'm truly just like, but how? How is this not on the short list? And that is Sorrowland by River Solomon. I loved this book in every aspect. I think it's, from a narrative perspective, a very page-turner, engaging story where you're at the edge of your seat wondering what is happening to Vern, how will they survive, what's going on, like, in terms of entertaining, page-turning story, it's got that. But then in addition, beautiful writing. And in addition to that, amazing thematic nuance and density, great representation. It is not fitting into one genre box. It is speculative in every way. It doesn't, allow itself to just be sci-fi or just be horror, or just be fantasy. It's doing all the things. How is this not a book that should be considered for an award like this? I don't know. I mean, part of the HUGOs is that it's not like a panel of judges who nominates things. It's just people who pay to support Worldcon. So that's part of it. But also, this should have been nominated, like, truly. This was a miss, guys. This was a miss. This is one of the best sci-fi, fantasy, horror works that came out in 2021. Like, truly. You cannot convince me that it is worse than all 6 of these books. You just can't. But now we'll just get into the ranking. I just wanted to vent because I love Sorrowland so much, and it deserved better. But number 6, for me, is A Master of Jinn. This is just also my least favorite. This kind of ranking is a combination of my personal enjoyment, entertainment quality, but also when I think of awards, like kind of what I was talking about with Sorrowland, I think, what was the quality of the writing and the craft? And in so much as I can be an expert on that, I'm not an expert, I just read a lot of books, so I compare them to each other. What's its novelty, uniqueness? What is it bringing to the art? What's it doing that makes it a standout? Like, that could be uniqueness, that could also just be, this is the best example of this type of thing, even if it's been done before. There's a lot of ways to interpret that, but, what's it bringing to the table? Why should this get the best of award sort of thing? And for me, A Master of Jinn is a good story, but I had a lot of issues with it, and part of it could be it's not my subgenre. I don't really like mystery detective works, and that's what this is. It is what it is, but I also felt like in that subgenre, because I have read it, even if I don't love it that much. I've even read it in the fantasy sphere. I've read it in terms of just picking up, murder mystery stories. Like, I've experienced this genre even if it's not my favorite. I thought this was poorly paced. I thought it was really frustrating to read because we have main characters who are great. I have no issues with the character work. They are intelligent, fascinating individuals that are easy, I think, to follow and root for. But even though on page I am told they are smart, I couldn't really see how they missed it when, as a reader, especially if you are reading this knowing you're reading a story, I'm like, it's so obvious. And I don't mind figuring something out before a book. I mind that, like, it was just, why didn't my characters get there a little sooner? Why did it take so long? And it's a little bit long. I think I would have liked this if it was a little tighter. I was actually surprised that it was overly long because typically he writes novellas, and I really like The Black God's Drum. I haven't actually really gotten on with any of the Cairo novellas or short stories, and I think it's just because of the subgenre. So this is at the bottom because it just truly was, for me, my least favorite work. I have some actual, critiques about, its pacing, its framework, and honestly, it's something that doesn't stick with me. Now, I'm in the minority. This won the Nebula. People love the Cairo series. They love this story. So I think it's one of those things that if it's your genre, maybe if you love the characters enough, the flaws that I see, you don't notice while you read it. Because that happens to me all the time with books that I love. Someone can be like, yeah, but how did XYZ not happen? And they're like, oh, didn't notice that, so I still had a great engaging time. But in terms of why should this get a best of, for me, it'd be really hard to rank it higher than 6 on this list of books. Now, number 5 was actually kind of a surprise just because I've been hearing such mixed things, and I just didn't know where I'd fall on it, and it's an author who I've tried 2 works from, one I really enjoyed, one I DNF'd, so I just didn't know where I would land, and that is Project Hail Mary. This is kind of the perfect example of blockbuster sci-fi, I call it. Like, it's a page-turner, you've got a lot of save-the-day energy, you have to suspend a lot of disbelief in terms of the main characters and his qualifications for why he's as good as he is at saving the day. You can easily see this becoming a Christopher Nolan film. This has wide appeal. This is a book that brings people into science fiction. All of these things cannot be discounted. Like, this is, some people might only read like one science fiction book every 5 to 10 years, and this would be one of them. So it's important to the genre in terms of it is an entry point. Andy Weir's an entry point for people. It's engaging. I actually had a pretty fun time with it. That said, those are the only qualities for me in terms of like the other books on the list. It was fun. It was a fun time. I don't think it's like the most fun. I think The Martian is a better example of this than this work, although I like Project Hail Mary more than The Martian because it has some teamwork elements, and I'm always a sucker for interpersonal relationships. So I think it has value, but I just like a bunch of the other works a bit more in terms of craft and what it gave to me as a reader. Number 4 is The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers. So I have like a weird history with Becky Chambers. I first started before I was on the bookish internet in 2018, maybe 2019. I read The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet because, you know, that's the one everyone talks about. It's the one that's at the bookstore all the time. I picked it up and I liked it, but I didn't love it. It was like reading a Star Trek series, but without anything that I like about watching Star Trek. It was weird for me. It was very episodic. It was really disjointed. Maybe if I read it now, it'd be a bit better because I'm better at reading short stories and episodic things. But at the time, I was just like, I didn't have payoff. And also, I agree with a lot of the themes Becky Chambers puts on page, but her execution always feels a little too preachy to me. Like, I don't need to be preached to, and I don't think the people that need to be preached to are the ones picking up her works. You know, like, so I just kind of felt like, well, yes, I agree with you, but I would like to focus on something else. So, and I think that's a personal preference, because again, the minority, people love Becky Chambers books. Love them. But this is, I think, my second favorite one. And the reason I have it here is because I really like the narrative framework. I think I haven't read a story like this in a long time, and I was just so happy that it existed, where you just have this kind of isolated group of individuals because of circumstances, and they just get to interact with each other while they're waiting for the thing that's causing their isolation from everyone else to be resolved. And I love that. That's like a classic like Alfred Hitchcock setup. It's like, it's classic plays, and I love those things. And so I was suddenly in a narrative framework I just haven't been in a while, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed kind of the medium stakes of the situation. Like, these aren't the people trying to save the day or fix the situation. They're just caught up in it, and then they get to know each other, and I think it was the appropriate length for it. And so I had a good time, and I think it got bumped above Project Hail Mary just because of the novelty of just the premise and why my characters were just so claustrophobically isolated to just this group of people. I just like that. I'm a sucker for that. It's a personal preference thing. Although I do still have, like, my issues with how she chooses to preach her themes. Like, it just doesn't work for me. That's a personal thing. It's truly one of those things where I'm like, I know what you're saying. I believe that. I agree. Can we focus on something else? Like, it's just one of those things. And I do wonder, like, I just don't know if the people who need to be preached that hard to are the ones picking up her books. And it's also not one of those things where it's like a cathartic preaching, where it's like, oh yeah, you say that because I agree and I need more people to say. I don't know. It's a weird thing that I can't quite articulate, but still, you know, pretty high up on the list. Number 3 is actually one that I liked less than numbers 4 and 5, but I really appreciate what it did from a literature point of view, and that's She Who Became the Sun. So I actually have a review for this on the channel. It's actually one of my most watched reviews. You never know what reviews will do well when you film them. You truly don't. And I don't know why this one did well, but it's doing pretty okay. And so this is one where it's, I think, discussing the start of the Ming Dynasty, but from a gender-bent situation. And I just love the discussion of gender in this historical fantasy. I really love how that's done and how nuanced it is and how messy it is. I just, although from a narrative entertainment perspective, it's not my favorite thing, but I'm also not a military fantasy person, so like the strategy parts are not my favorite thing. I really enjoyed following our two main perspectives and their relationships to gender and society and how that influences their actions, but also what other factors influence their actions, and just the messiness of our main point of view. I was just like blown away at the nuance of their character. So this one, I just felt like the gender identity representation and how it was translated to this historical lens was just really well done. And that's partially why it gets so put up high. I do have some slight issues with the number of similes, and also just the fact that some of the similes did not make sense to me. I would reread several of the similes and just be like, what does this mean, Shelley? I don't understand this sentence. So sometimes I'd get the I feel dumb syndrome, or does it actually make sense syndrome? And I never know, because sometimes I am just, missing the point. I don't understand the context. But I give it the benefit of the doubt that, sometimes I just missed it. I just didn't understand. These next two are true personal favorites. Both of them are 5 stars. I am actually really happy they were nominated, and one of them was a complete surprise, but if you've watched one of my recent videos, you're probably not surprised it's number 1. But number 2 might be surprising to people who have missed that video, is A Desolation Called Peace by Arkady Martine. So technically, I like this book more than A Memory Called Empire. But I think A Memory Called Empire is more deserving of reward because of my weird pseudo, amalgamation system. But A Desolation Called Peace is a wonderful sequel to an amazing, start of a series. I like A Desolation Called Peace more in an entertainment way because it has the military sci-fi stuff I like. It has first contact stuff I like. We get more point of view, so I get to actually be with 3 seagrass and things like that. There's a great discussion on media and how that can influence identity. The themes of memory and belonging and empire still very prevalent and strong. I really enjoyed this story, but it does not take up nearly as much of my brain as A Memory Called Empire does. Truly, it just does not stick in my head as much as that book. And so this one just wasn't as thematically rich. And then when I compare it to number 1, it was no contest. It was truly no contest that A Light from Uncommon Stars is hands down the one that I think should win the HUGO award. I don't think it will, because I don't really understand the pool of people who vote for this, but I don't think it will win. I'd be so happy if it did. Oh my gosh. And I'm making a review video for it because I just have to keep talking about this book. I just had a friend over last night. I'm like, you need to read this book. It is so good. But it's also so weird because it's not this is the whole what do you bring to the genre? This is so unique. I've never read anything like it. It's so entertaining. I couldn't put it down. I read it in 2 days flat. I stopped other entertaining books I was reading that I wanted to read because I had to finish this. It has such a nuanced blend of different themes, and it's just it reminded me of the feeling of when I left the theater after Everything Everywhere All at Once, where I'm like, how did I have such a rich emotional experience combined with some of the most bizarre sci-fi tropes I have ever encountered in one space? The dissonance of that, I think, is going to be what turns people away from it, but it's also, I think, one of its best features. It's an amazing work. I'm so glad I own it. I cannot wait to reread it. And I do also recognize that my engagement with music probably also, incorporates how I care about this work. But it's more than just the music in this story, because this story, it has music, it has found family, it has dealing with trauma, whether that's, trauma from being harmed in the past or PTSD. It just has so much. It is such a rich work. And I think of all of these, especially based off just my personal enjoyment, it was hands down this book, and then everything else was just so far below it. Before I read this book, I was actually kind of underwhelmed by this list of nominees. I was like, I don't really know which one in my head should get the HUGO. Before that, I was like, I guess A Desolation Called Peace, because that's my favorite. But then I read this, and I'm like, yeah, this is the one. This is the one that, is so unique. It brings something so special to the genre. And, I'm just happy that it did make the shortlist, especially since Sorrowland didn't. Which, if I had to vote between Sorrowland and The Light from Uncommon Stars, I don't even know what I would do. Talk about 2 different but, really great works. I don't know. But that is my ranking of all of these works. Feel free to disagree with me. I liked all of these books. I think the lowest rating I gave them was a 3.5 for A Master of Jin. So they were all great reads. I was actually really happy to read the ones that I hadn't read because I had a way better time with the ones I hadn't read than I expected. As I said in a video recently, I expected to appreciate A Light from Uncommon Stars. I didn't expect it to become part of my new booktube personality. I did not expect that. That was That was not something I was prepared for, and it's amazing. But if you made it this far and you don't really, care about talking about what your ranking preferences would be, if you have any questions about voting for the HUGOs, you can ask those down below. It's too late to vote for this year, but if you pay for a supporting membership, you can nominate and vote, and stuff like that. I don't know. I have a lot of mixed, complicated thoughts about the HUGOs, but I read them all, and I wanted to vote for them because I read them all. And also, I more importantly wanted to nominate because I keep getting frustrated each year that books that I love, that I think are deserving of recognition, do not get nominated. And, yeah, it's just one of those things. But if you just want to leave an emoji, leave a space emoji. A lot of these were space books, so we're just going to say space emoji. Otherwise, like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.